No one ever spoke about Marrow's end during the day. It was a place whispered in passing, a rumor half forgotten and dismissed as a ghost story by those who lived near the old highway. Yet, for Jonah, it had always been a lure, a curiosity that refused to fade. The town supposedly appeared only on certain nights, veiled by fog and shadow, accessible only to those brave or foolish enough to follow the whispers. It began on a cold autumn evening. Jonah had been driving along the winding highway, headlights cutting through the dense fog. The air smelled faintly of wet leaves and something else, something metallic, like iron mixed with rain. Ahead, the fog thickened unnaturally, and shapes began to take form. Buildings that weren't there moments before, their outlines warped and shimmering like mirages. He slowed the car, heart pounding. The air grew heavy, thick with a strange tension, and a faint hum echoed in the distance, impossible to place. Streetlights flickered sporadically, though he knew the highway had none. Then, suddenly, the town appeared. A cobblestone street stretched ahead, lined with buildings whose architecture belonged to no era Jonah recognized. Shops bore faded signs with letters that seemed to shift subtly when glanced at. The windows reflected the fog, but inside, shadowy figures moved, always just beyond the edge of clarity. He parked at the side of the road. The silence was almost total, broken only by the soft crunch of his boots on the stones as he stepped onto the street. The fog swirled unnaturally around him, curling into shapes that suggested faces watching from the mist. He tried to rationalize it. Perhaps a dream, perhaps a hallucination. Yet the cold bite in his lungs and the solid feel of the cobblestones beneath his feet told him otherwise. He was here, fully awake, and the town was real, at least for tonight. A low whisper brushed against his ears. "Welcome." Jonah spun, but the street was empty. The buildings loomed silently, and the fog thickened, curling around him like a living thing. Windows stared at him, reflections shifting slightly, revealing fleeting glimpses of figures he could not identify. People who seemed frozen in motion, yet alive. The farther he walked, the more he noticed the oddities. Street signs pointed to places that did not exist. Alleyways curved in impossible angles, and the air smelled faintly of rot beneath the fog's damp sweetness. A faint music drifted from somewhere, a piano playing a tune that was hauntingly familiar, yet twisted in dissonance. Jonah stopped in front of a small clock tower. Its face glowed faintly, though the hands did not move in any consistent manner. Time here did not obey normal rules. He felt a shiver crawl down his spine. A figure emerged from the mist. A man, tall and thin, dressed in clothes that belonged to no era. His face pale and angular, eyes black as obsidian. He spoke without moving his lips. "Do not linger too long, Jonah. The town does not forget those who wander." Before Jonah could respond, the figure melted back into the fog, leaving only the whispering echo of the words. He realized then that the town's nights were longer, more encompassing than any ordinary night, and once the town appeared, it would not let him leave until it chose to vanish again. Jonah's heart raced. He was caught between fascination and terror, drawn into a place that existed outside reality, outside time. And as the fog shifted, he could hear faint murmurs of other voices, trapped somewhere in the twisted streets. "Stay, stay."
Jonah's curiosity pushed him forward, despite the gnawing dread twisting in his stomach. The cobblestone street stretched endlessly, twisting in ways that made his sense of direction useless. Every building seemed alive, their walls subtly shifting, windows catching glimpses of things just out of reach. He passed a small bakery, its door slightly ajar, though no light came from inside. The smell of freshly baked bread filled the air, oddly comforting in a place otherwise steeped in unease. Yet as he peered in, shadows danced along the counter. A figure, hunched and thin, turned slowly toward him, and Jonah caught a flash of hollow eyes. The figure vanished the moment he blinked. The fog thickened, curling around his legs like cold fingers. Jonah's pulse quickened as he noticed something more disturbing. The light streets flickered in unison, though there were no electrical wires. The light revealed the ground beneath his feet, revealing cracks that moved as if the street itself breathed. Ahead, a small square opened up, centered around a fountain frozen mid-splash. Water appeared solid, suspended in mid-air, as though the laws of physics were paused. Around the fountain, other figures stood motionless, their heads tilted unnaturally, faces obscured by shadow, yet Jonah could feel their gaze piercing him. A soft melody began to drift through the square, a voice whispering harmoniously, calling his name. Jonah froze. The sound was not human, but not entirely alien. It felt intimate, as if the town itself was aware of him. Suddenly, a door at the far end of the square swung open. Light spilled out in thin beams, revealing a street that hadn't existed moments ago. Jonah felt a compulsion to walk toward it. Every instinct screamed to flee, yet he found himself stepping forward, drawn by something he could not comprehend. The street led him past shops that sold items he did not recognize, books with pages that shimmered faintly, jars filled with shadows, clocks that ticked backward. The hum of the town intensified, vibrating in his chest, and Jonah felt a strange disorientation, as if the night were longer than it should be. He stopped before a small inn, its sign swinging with a ghostly creak, the Moonlit Lantern. The door opened silently, inviting him in. Inside, the inn was empty, or so it seemed. Tables and chairs were arranged neatly, but there were no signs of life. Yet the whispers continued, urging him forward, guiding him to the back room. Jonah hesitated, clutching his coat tighter around himself. The walls here seemed alive, subtly pulsating. The whispers grew more distinct. "You belong here. You cannot leave. Stay."
Jonah's breath came in shallow gasps as the inn's walls seemed to pulse around him. The whispers had grown louder, overlapping in a dissonant harmony that filled his mind. Shadows shifted in the corners of the room, stretching toward him like living things. He tried the door. Locked. No matter how hard he pulled, it would not budge. The faint light from the windows shimmered unnaturally, revealing fleeting glimpses of figures standing silently outside, watching, waiting. A low creak echoed from the staircase leading upstairs. Jonah's curiosity battled with his fear. Each step seemed to stretch endlessly, the staircase bending in impossible ways. Finally, he reached the top floor. The hallway was lined with doors, all slightly ajar. A soft glow emanated from beneath each one, casting strange, shifting shadows along the walls. One door called to him, subtly, irresistibly. He approached it slowly. The door swung open before his hand touched the handle. Inside, the room was empty, except for a single chair facing the window. A figure sat there, hunched, head bowed, fingers drumming on its knees. "Who are you?" Jonah asked, his voice trembling. The figure did not answer. Slowly, it lifted its head, revealing a face that shifted with every blink, sometimes young, sometimes old, sometimes
horrifyingly inhuman. Jonah stumbled back, heart racing. The whispers crescendoed into a single phrase repeated over and over, "You belong here." He realized then that the town was alive, not just the buildings or the fog, but the town itself. It had awareness, intelligence, a will, and now it had noticed him. Suddenly the chair exploded into shadows, swirling around him. The floor seemed to drop away, yet Jonah did not fall. The town was bending reality, folding the world around him. He could see glimpses of streets that should not exist, alleys twisting into themselves, and figures walking upside down along walls. Jonah stumbled into another room, this one filled with mirrors. Each reflected a different version of himself, all twisted in subtle, horrifying ways. Some smiled at him with impossibly wide grins. Others stared with hollow eyes. The whispers turned into voices, each speaking at once, recounting his life in minute detail, secrets he had never shared with anyone. He realized with a chill that the town remembered everything about him, everything about anyone who entered, and it never let go. A sudden movement in the largest mirror caught his attention. A door had appeared in the reflection, glowing faintly. It was not in the room itself, only in the mirrored world. Something compelled him to reach toward it. The moment his fingers brushed the surface, the room shifted. Jonah felt weightless, suspended between reality and the town's warped reflection. Shapes moved around him, whispering, beckoning, pressing him further into the town's maze. He tried to pull back, to resist, but the town was patient. It enveloped him completely, surrounding him with endless streets, endless windows, endless fog. And somewhere, deep in the distance, a bell tolled softly, marking the hours of a night that seemed to have no end. Jonah knew with absolute certainty that once the town appeared, those who entered were no longer fully themselves, and the town, it never forgot.
Jonah stumbled through the distorted streets, each step echoing unnaturally. The fog thickened around him, curling like fingers that sought to pull him into the ground. The town itself seemed alive, reshaping its layout as he moved. Streets he had walked moments ago no longer existed, replaced by narrow alleys that twisted impossibly. From a shadowed doorway, he caught sight of a figure, a woman, ethereal and pale, dressed in tattered garments that fluttered, though there was no wind. Her eyes glowed faintly, and she beckoned him with a slow, deliberate motion. Jonah hesitated, but the compulsion to follow was overwhelming. Each step toward her brought new oddities, shops with shelves full of objects that shimmered and warped, doors that led to rooms that appeared extended infinitely, and reflections in puddles that did not match the reality around him. The woman led him to a square he hadn't seen before. The fountain here was different. Its water flowed upward, defying gravity, spilling into the foggy sky. Around the square, shadows moved as if they had a life of their own, forming vague human-like shapes that watched Jonah carefully. "You shouldn't be here," the woman whispered. Her voice echoed unnaturally, layered with hundreds of overlapping tones. The town chooses its visitors, and it remembers those who linger. Jonah tried to ask her what she meant, but his words seemed swallowed by the fog. He felt a strange vertigo, the sensation that the ground beneath him was tilting, folding in on itself. A low hum filled the air, vibrating against his chest. Jonah realized it was the town itself, the streets, the buildings, the fog, all alive, aware and sentient. Every object, every shadow, every whisper was part of it. Suddenly a door appeared in the square. Unlike the others, this one pulsed with a soft golden light. He felt a compulsion stronger than fear or curiosity. It was necessity. He had to open it. Inside, the room was small, yet impossibly vast. Shelves lined with books stretched into shadows, each tome whispering as he passed. A table in the center held a map depicting the town, but it shifted every few seconds, streets rearranging, buildings rising and disappearing. He realized the town itself was alive, continuously altering, and he was trapped within its rhythm. The woman's voice broke his thoughts. The town shows itself only on certain nights. Few survive long enough to see the sunrise, and those who do never return the same. Jonah shivered. He felt the weight of countless unseen eyes, watching, judging, waiting. The town was not just a place, it was a living entity, ancient and patient, feeding on those who wandered its streets. From somewhere deep within the fog, he heard faint laughter. Children? Or something older, something that had no right to exist. The whispers intensified. "Stay! Do not leave! Stay!" Jonah realized he was at a crossroads. The golden door offered escape, or perhaps deeper immersion into the town's endless night. Every instinct screamed to flee, yet the town's pull was magnetic. He felt the presence of the town envelop him like a predator observing prey. As he reached for the door, the fog swirled violently, shadows stretching toward him. He had crossed a threshold, and there was no turning back. The night had claimed him, and the town's secrets were beginning to unfold.
Jonah stepped through the golden door, and the room stretched far beyond his imagination. Shadows moved independently, forming corridors that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions at once. The map on the table shifted violently, outlining streets that he had never seen, buildings that twisted impossibly, and squares that shimmered in unnatural light. From the shadows, figures began to emerge, not fully human, yet not entirely inhuman. They moved with deliberate grace, observing him silently. Some had elongated limbs, others wore tattered clothing from eras long forgotten. Their eyes glowed faintly in the darkness, and Jonah felt each gaze pierce his very thoughts. A man stepped forward, taller than the rest, with a face that flickered between young and old. His voice was soft but layered, echoing as though spoken by many at once. "You are far from the roads of your world. Few stumble upon Marrow's end, fewer still survive its nights." Jonah swallowed hard. Why does it exist?" he asked, voice trembling. The man's shadowed form seemed to stretch, merging with the fog. "It is older than memory, older than the maps your world draws. The town exists in the spaces between time and reality, emerging only on nights it chooses. Those who enter become part of it. Some willingly, others unwillingly." The whispers grew louder, almost overwhelming now. Jonah felt a pull in his chest, as though the town itself was reaching inside him, probing, testing his will. Figures stepped closer, forming a circle around him, their movements fluid, almost hypnotic. One of them, a young woman, pale with eyes that reflected starlight, spoke. "Do you know what happens to those who stay too long?" Her voice was melodic yet laced with despair. "The town remembers you, every thought, every fear. It folds you into its streets, its buildings, its fog. You are alive, but never truly free." Jonah's heart raced. He felt an invisible weight pressing down, and the shadows twisted in response to his panic. He wanted to run, yet the town streets outside the golden door had shifted, removing any sense of direction. It was as though the town itself had decided he belonged here.
The tall man stepped closer. "You have a choice, though it may be an illusion. Leave now, and the town may release you. Stay, and you will understand the true nature of Marrow's end. But you may not recognize yourself afterward." Jonah's gaze flicked to the map. Streets moved like living veins, pulsing with energy. Somewhere deep within the shifting patterns, he could see figures, perhaps people, trapped, wandering endlessly in loops, faces twisted in silent screams. A whisper caressed his ear. "You cannot leave. You are already part of us." Jonah's instincts screamed to flee, yet a part of him, a dangerous curiosity, urged him to explore further. The town was alive, and it wanted him to see, to learn, to understand, or perhaps to succumb. A sudden chill swept the room. The figures closed in, forming a protective, yet threatening circle. Jonah realized with a jolt he was no longer simply a visitor. The town had marked him, chosen him, and now the night would reveal what it truly demanded of those who dared enter.
Jonah's hands trembled as he stepped further into the room. The shadows pulsed, stretching along the walls and ceiling like living veins. The figures around him remained silent, their eyes glowing faintly in the dim light, yet their presence pressed upon him like a tangible weight. He tried to steady his thoughts, recalling the man's words. The town chose its visitors, and it remembered. Every movement, every thought, every fear was etched into the streets, the fog, the buildings themselves. The knowledge sent a shiver down his spine. He was no longer just a wanderer. He was part of the town now. A soft, melodic hum filled the room. It came from nowhere and everywhere at once, vibrating in his chest. It was both beautiful and terrifying, weaving through the shadows and threading into his mind. The figures began to move, not toward him but in synchronized patterns that shaped invisible paths through the fog. "Follow," whispered the young woman, her voice barely audible over the hum. "If you wish to survive the night, follow." Jonah obeyed, stepping carefully along the paths carved by shadows. The room seemed to fold around him, corridors lengthening and shortening with each step. Every turn led him deeper into the town's heart, revealing streets that twisted impossibly, alleys that seemed to reach into other dimensions, and buildings that shifted like living organisms. From the mist, faint silhouettes emerged. Children playing, laughing with hollow voices. Merchants arranging invisible wares. Men and women frozen mid-step, their expressions vacant yet intensely aware. Jonah's stomach churned. He was witnessing life, or the imitation of it. The young woman guided him to a plaza he could not have imagined existed. At its center stood a clock tower, larger than any building he had seen before, its hands spinning backward in irregular intervals. The fog around it formed strange shapes, faces, hands reaching toward him. The hum intensified as if the town itself were breathing. Jonah felt a pull in his chest, a gravity that drew him toward the tower. Each step closer revealed more details, carvings along the stone depicting impossible landscapes, inscriptions in a language that shifted when glanced at, and shadows that seemed to move independently, interacting with the shapes in the fog. "You see," she said, her tone calm yet heavy. "The town is older than memory. It survives because it draws from those who enter, shaping them into its reality. Some resist, some succumb, but all are changed." Jonah's pulse raced. He wanted to turn back, yet he could not. The streets behind him had disappeared, leaving only fog and shadows, as if the town had swallowed the paths he had traveled. The golden door, his point of entry, no longer existed. From the depths of the clock tower, a low toll began. Each time vibrated through the fog, sending waves of disorientation through Jonah's mind. Time here had no meaning, yet each time carried the weight of countless nights, countless visitors trapped, countless stories swallowed by the town. Jonah understood fully. To survive this night, he could not resist the town. He had to move with it, learn its rhythm, pretend he belonged, and hope the night would eventually release him. And as he took his first deliberate steps toward the clock tower, the whispers returned, faint and omnipresent. You belong. You belong. You belong.
Jonah's hands trembled as he stepped further into the room. The shadows pulsed, stretching along the walls and ceiling like living veins. The figures around him remained silent, their eyes glowing faintly in the dim light, yet their presence pressed upon him like a tangible weight. He tried to steady his thoughts, recalling the man's words, "The town chose its visitors, and it remembered." Every movement, every thought, every fear was etched into the streets, the fog, the buildings themselves. The knowledge sent a shiver down his spine. He was no longer just a wanderer, he was part of the town now. A soft, melodic hum filled the room. It came from nowhere and everywhere at once, vibrating in his chest. It was both beautiful and terrifying, weaving through the shadows and threading into his mind. The figures began to move, not toward him, but in synchronized patterns that shaped invisible paths through the fog. "Follow," whispered the young woman, her voice barely audible over the hum. "If you wish to survive the night, follow." Jonah obeyed, stepping carefully along the paths carved by shadows. The room seemed to fold around him, corridors lengthening and shortening with each step. Every turn led him deeper into the town's heart, revealing streets that twisted impossibly, alleys that seemed to reach into other dimensions, and buildings that shifted like living organisms. From the mist, faint silhouettes emerged, children playing, laughing with hollow voices, merchants arranging invisible wares, men and women frozen mid-step, their expressions vacant yet intensely aware. Jonah's stomach churned. He was witnessing life, or the imitation of it. The young woman guided him to a plaza he could not have imagined existed. At its center stood a clock tower, larger than any building he had seen before, its hands spinning backward in irregular intervals. The fog around it formed strange shapes, faces, hands reaching toward him. The hum intensified, as if the town itself were breathing. Jonah felt a pull in his chest, a gravity that drew him toward the tower. Each step closer revealed more details, carvings along the stone depicting impossible landscapes, inscriptions in a language that shifted when glanced at, and shadows that seemed to move independently, interacting with the shapes in the fog. "You see," said the young woman, her tone calm yet heavy. "The town is older than memory. It survives because it draws from those who enter, shaping them into its reality. Some resist, some succumb, but all are changed." Jonah's pulse raced. He wanted to turn back, yet he could not. The streets behind him had disappeared, leaving only fog and shadows, as if the town had swallowed the paths he had traveled. The golden door, his point of entry, no longer existed. From the depths of the clock tower, a low toll began. Each chime vibrated through the fog, sending waves of disorientation through Jonah's mind. Time here had no meaning, yet each chime carried the weight of countless nights, countless visitors trapped, countless stories swallowed by the town. Jonah understood fully. To survive this night, he could not resist the town. He had to move with it, learn its rhythm, pretend he belonged, and hope the night would eventually release him. And as he took his first deliberate steps toward the clock tower, the whispers returned, faint and omnipresent. "You belong. You belong.
You belong. Jonah followed the narrow street, each step resonating in the foggy silence. The buildings along the street twisted impossibly, their windows reflecting not the town around him, but scenes from distant, unfamiliar places. Shadows stretched along the walls, forming shapes that moved independently, sometimes reaching toward him, sometimes vanishing before he could comprehend them. The figures guiding him were silent, their faces obscured by hoods and mist. Every now and then, Jonah caught glimpses of eyes glowing faintly beneath the hoods. They were watching, not threatening, but observing, recording his every movement. A sudden sound made him freeze, a door creaking open somewhere to his left. Jonah turned and saw a small shop with a sign that read, "Memories and Echoes." Inside, shelves were filled with jars containing indistinct shapes, flickering faintly. Shadows moved within each jar, twisting and writhing, almost like captured souls. A whisper came from the mist. Some who wander too long become part of the town. Their memories, their fears, trapped here forever. Jonah felt a chill. He wanted to turn back, but the street behind him had disappeared, replaced by a dense wall of fog. There was only forward. The figures led him to a small plaza where the air shimmered with unnatural light. A fountain stood at the center, its water flowing upward, defying gravity. Around it, ghostly children played silently, their laughter hollow yet bone-chilling. Jonah realized that the town's illusions were not random, they were deliberate, designed to unbalance and manipulate anyone who entered. "You must be careful," the young woman said, stepping from the shadows. "The town feeds on curiosity and fear. It tests its visitors, learns them, remembers them. Some never leave because they fail to understand its rules." Jonah's heart raced. He asked, "Rules? What rules?" "The town chooses who walks its streets and when. It shifts reality to see how you respond. Every choice matters. Every glance, every hesitation is noted. The town decides if you are worthy of survival or if you are to become part of its memory." As to illustrate her words, a figure emerged from the fountain's upward-flowing water. Its limbs were long, its face fluid, shifting constantly. The children around it froze, then dissolved into mist. Jonah stumbled backward, the fog pressing closer. "Do not look directly at them for too long," the woman whispered. "The town's eyes are everywhere. They see everything, and it remembers." Jonah tried to focus on the path ahead, but the fog twisted, the streets bending into impossible angles. The fountain's water shimmered with scenes of his past, moments he could not have remembered with such clarity. The town had already learned him, dissected his memory, and was now playing with his perception. A sudden bell tolled from the clock tower above. The sound reverberated through the plaza, and the shadows froze. Jonah felt the town's attention fully on him, like an invisible weight pressing into his mind. The young woman took his hand. "You are being tested. Do not falter. Move with the town, and it may let you leave, or at least survive this night." Jonah swallowed hard. He knew she was telling the truth. To resist was to be lost, to disappear in the streets and alleys forever. To follow was to survive, but survival came at a cost, one that he could not yet comprehend. And as he stepped forward, the fog thickened around him, swallowing the plaza, twisting the streets, and folding reality into the town's labyrinth. Jonah had entered fully into Marrow's end, and there was no turning back.
Jonah's steps echoed strangely in the warped streets.
Each building seemed to breathe, walls stretching and contracting like lungs. Fog wrapped around him, cold and dense, carrying whispers that seemed to come from every direction at once. You belong. You cannot leave. You are ours. The young woman guided him to a narrow alley where lanterns hung in midair, glowing with a pale, otherworldly light. The air was thick with a metallic scent, like iron and rain. Shadows moved independently along the walls, forming grotesque shapes that occasionally resolved into distorted human faces. "You must understand," she said, her voice urgent, layered with echoes. "The town is not a place. It is a consciousness, older than memory, older than any map. It chooses its nights, its visitors, and its victims. Once it marks you, it remembers everything." Jonah swallowed hard. His mind spun as he realized the truth. This town did not merely exist on certain nights. It lived on them. The fog, the buildings, the streets, the shadows, they were all extensions of the town's awareness. Every fear, every hesitation he had experienced since entering was cataloged, woven into the fabric of Marrow's End. From the fog ahead, he saw figures moving in unison, their faces pale and expressionless. They carried objects, books, jars, clocks, all of which seemed to hum with unnatural energy. Jonah's gaze lingered on a clock whose hands moved backward, and he realized that time here had no meaning. Past, present, and future all coexisted in the same twisting streets. A sudden shriek echoed through the alley, making his heart leap. A figure, humanoid but impossibly elongated, lunged from the shadows. Jonah stumbled back, nearly tripping over the cobblestones, but the young woman grabbed his arm and pulled him into a narrow doorway. Inside, the room was dark, lined with mirrors. Each mirror reflected a different version of Jonah, some smiling with unnatural grins, some screaming silently, others distorted in ways his mind could barely comprehend. The town had trapped fragments of himself, his memories and fears, reflecting them back in impossible multiplicity. "You see now," the woman whispered. "The town tests all who enter. It shapes reality, manipulates perception, and records every detail. Some succumb, and their essence becomes part of it. Others resist, but only for so long." Jonah's pulse raced. He could feel the weight of countless eyes upon him, watching from the fog outside, from the shadows in the streets, from the mirrors around him. The town's presence was absolute, pressing against his mind, bending his perception, and distorting his sense of reality. From somewhere deep within the fog, a bell tolled. Its sound reverberated unnaturally, vibrating through Jonah's chest. The streets outside shifted in response, twisting, folding, and reforming. The town's consciousness was active, aware, and fully focused on him. He knew now that the town did not merely appear on certain nights. It claimed those who stumbled upon it. Every alley, every figure, every shadow was a trap, a mechanism to bend visitors into its will. Jonah's survival depended entirely on understanding its patterns, on moving with it rather than against it. The young woman extended her hand. "Come," she urged. "The clock tower awaits. There you will see the heart of Marrow's End, and perhaps understand what it truly wants from you." Jonah hesitated, but instinct and fear compelled him forward. Each step brought the fog closer, shadows curling around him like living fingers. He had entered fully into the town's domain, and the night stretched endlessly before him. The heart of Marrow's End awaited, and Jonah was about to confront it. Jonah stepped into the plaza surrounding the clock tower. The fog here was thicker, almost tangible, curling around his legs and pressing cold against his skin. The tower itself loomed impossibly high, its spire disappearing into the swirling mist above. Time seemed fractured. Its hands moved backward, forward, and sometimes not at all. The young woman remained at his side. "This is the heart of the town," she whispered. "Every street, every shadow, every figure is connected to it. What happens here dictates everything else." Jonah swallowed hard, noticing faint shapes moving near the tower's base. Figures, humanoid yet distorted, shuffled endlessly in circles, their faces frozen in silent screams. Each step they took seemed to echo across the streets, reverberating in impossible patterns. A low hum began to fill the plaza, vibrating in Jonah's chest. The town was awakening, aware of his presence fully. Shadows stretched outward from the tower, crawling along the streets like living tendrils. Some coalesced into grotesque figures, others merely shifted, leaving ripples in the fog. "You must ascend," the woman said, pointing to the narrow staircase spiraling inside the tower. "If you wish to understand, you must see what the town wants you to see. But be careful. Many who reach the top do not return the same." Jonah hesitated at the base of the stairs. The air smelled of wet stone and something metallic, sharp. His heartbeat thundered in his ears. Each step upward felt heavier than the last, as if the tower itself resisted him. From below, whispers grew into an overlapping chorus. "Stay, belong, remain." At the halfway point, the walls of the tower began to shift. Faces appeared, contorted in terror and pain, pressed against the stone as if trapped within it. Jonah shivered, feeling their silent screams pierce his mind. He wanted to look away, but the town compelled him forward, urging him to observe, to remember. At the top, the staircase opened into a circular room bathed in dim, golden light. In the center floated a translucent orb swirling with mist and shadow. Within it, scenes unfolded, streets twisting impossibly, figures wandering endlessly, Jonah himself moving through the town in fragmented versions. The young woman's voice echoed from nowhere. "This is the town's consciousness. It sees, it remembers, and it shapes reality. Everything you've experienced, everything you fear, it is all part of its design." Jonah approached the orb, and as he did, the whispers transformed into voices, countless voices layered on top of one another, recounting every memory he had, every fear, every choice he had ever made. The town had learned him completely. A sudden surge of understanding struck him. The town did not merely observe, it consumed. Not bodies, but essence, memory, identity. Those who lingered too long became threads in its tapestry, woven into the streets, the fog, the walls themselves. The orb pulsed, and Jonah felt an almost magnetic pull. To touch it was to surrender, to merge with the town's will. Yet something within him resisted, an instinct for survival, a shred of self he refused to relinquish. The young woman stepped forward. "You have a choice," she said. "Touch, and you will understand fully, but you may never return. Step back, and the town may release you, though the night is long, and it tests those who hesitate." Jonah's breath came fast. Shadows writhed in the corners, tendrils of fog curling around him like grasping hands. The orb pulsed again, more insistently, beckoning. Time felt suspended. Every choice now held weight. every action would determine his fate. And as the clock tower's bells tolled, marking the endless night, Jonah knew he was on the precipice of becoming either a part of Marrow forever, or discovering the secret that might allow him to escape.
Jonah's fingers hovered over the orb, his mind racing. The swirling mist inside seemed alive, writhing with shadows, each one whispering fragments of memories, some his, some unknown. He realized with a jolt that these were not merely visions, they were echoes of the town's previous visitors, threads of identity woven into Marrow's End. The young woman's voice cut through the cacophony. Do you see now? This is what the town collects: essence, memory, fear, curiosity. It does not kill, it transforms. Those who succumb become part of its consciousness, part of its streets, its fog, its shadows. Jonah swallowed, feeling the weight of countless unseen eyes pressing upon him. The whispers intensified. You belong, you belong, you belong. Each repetition drove a cold shiver down his spine. He understood now that the town's nights were tests, and failure meant assimilation. Summoning every ounce of willpower, Jonah pulled back. The orb pulsed violently, almost like a heartbeat, and the shadows recoiled, writhing in protest. A chorus of anguished cries filled the tower, echoing across every street and alley of Marrow's End. The town had noticed his defiance. Very few resist fully, the woman said, her tone calm yet tinged with awe. But resistance is dangerous. The town tests further. It probes, it manipulates reality to challenge you. Jonah stepped away from the orb and toward the windows. From this height, he could see the town fully. Streets spiraling into impossible angles, buildings suspended in the fog, figures wandering in endless loops. The plaza below pulsed like a heart, a living entity dictating every motion within its streets. A sudden movement caught his eye, a group of figures ascending the stairs in the tower. They were pale, elongated, their faces twisted in permanent expressions of terror and wonder. Jonah recognized some of them from his earlier glimpses, the trapped echoes from the mirrors. The town had claimed them fully. The young woman reached for his hand again. The town will not easily release you, she warned, but there is a way to leave, or at least return to the world you know. You must follow carefully, obey its rhythm, and avoid looking too deeply into the depths of its consciousness. Jonah nodded, heart hammering. Every instinct screamed to flee, yet the town's pull was immense, almost magnetic. One wrong step, one glance too long at a shadow or reflection, and he could become another echo, another whisper, trapped in Marrow's End forever. The orb pulsed one final time, sending ripples through the fog and streets below. Jonah felt the town's awareness shift, focusing entirely on him. The night stretched endlessly, the fog curling like living fingers, and the whispers urged him onward. Move, survive, belong. Taking a deep breath, Jonah followed the young woman toward a narrow passage spiraling downward. The stairs twisted impossibly, the walls lined with mirrors reflecting infinite versions of the town, each subtly different, each whispering secrets he could barely comprehend. As they descended, Jonah realized that the night was reaching its apex. The town was preparing its ultimate test, the moment when it would either assimilate him or allow him to glimpse the secret that governed its existence. And somewhere deep within the fog, beyond the plaza and twisted streets, a faint golden light glimmered, the promise of revelation, or perhaps the lure of eternal entrapment.
Jonah's steps echoed through the spiraling staircase, each footfall distorted by the mirrors lining the walls. his reflection multiplied infinitely, each version subtly different, some terrified, some resigned, others grinning in ways that chilled him to the bone. The whispers followed him, overlapping into a chorus that pressed against his mind. You belong. You cannot leave. You are ours. The young woman's hand remained firm in his, guiding him downward. The town tests those who resist, she said. It will challenge your perception, your memories, even your sense of self. But it is also predictable. If you learn its rhythm, you may survive. Jonah forced himself to focus. Each twist of the staircase, each distorted reflection, seemed part of a pattern. The town moved like a living entity, folding streets, reshaping corridors, and stretching reality to trap or guide him. He realized the mirrors weren't mere reflections, they were portals, glimpses into parallel versions of Marrow's End, fragments of nights past, moments when the town had ensnared others. At the bottom of the stairs, they emerged into a courtyard he had not seen before. The fog was thinner here, revealing buildings that defied architecture. Rooftops spiraled like shells, windows arched impossibly, and staircases led to walls or vanished entirely. Figures moved through the streets below, some humanoid, others grotesque, all shadows of those the town had claimed over countless nights. The heart of the town, the young woman whispered, is not the clock tower or the streets. It is the knowledge it collects, the memories, fears, and identities of all who wander here. Everything is woven into the town, and all who enter leave a thread behind. Jonah shivered, staring down at the plaza. The fountain's water flowed upward, as if pulled by some invisible force. Children ran in endless circles around it, their laughter hollow, echoing unnaturally. Shadows twisted around the figures, forming shapes that seemed aware, alive, and yet part of the town itself. A low toll came from the clock tower, sending vibrations through the plaza. The fog shifted violently, and Jonah saw himself in multiple forms, walking the streets endlessly, trapped in mirrors, dissolving into mist. The town was showing him the consequences of lingering too long. "Do you understand now?" the woman asked. "This is what happens to those who fail to read the town's rhythm. They become part of it. Not dead, but not free. Memories, identity, essence, all absorbed into its consciousness." Jonah swallowed hard, heart hammering. He knew that to survive, he could not fight outright. He had to move with the town, obey its hidden rules, and find the narrow path that led back to reality. Ahead, he saw a faint glow through a twisted alley, a golden light, soft yet unwavering. The whispers urged him toward it. Move, survive, belong. The town seemed to guide him, testing his focus, his resolve, his understanding. Every step was a trial. Shadows reached for him. Reflections and mirrors twisted to confront him with his deepest fears, and the fog shifted unpredictably. Jonah felt the presence of countless others who had walked these streets before, their essence interwoven into the very fabric of Marrow's End. Yet with each careful step, he felt himself navigating the labyrinth, moving in rhythm with the town's consciousness rather than against it. The golden light ahead pulsed gently, promising insight, or perhaps freedom from the endless night. As he approached, the whispers softened into a single, coherent phrase. Those who see the heart of the town may leave, but they never forget. Jonah's hand tightened around the young woman's. The final challenge awaited, and the town's secret, the reason it existed and why it chose certain nights, was about to reveal itself.
The golden light grew brighter as Jonah approached, illuminating the alley in hues that felt unreal, almost liquid. Shadows that had pursued him throughout the night recoiled slightly,
like animals recognizing the dominance of something greater. The whispers softened, but their presence lingered, weaving through the fog like threads of warning. "This is it," the young woman said, her voice steady yet tinged with solemnity. "Here the town reveals itself fully. You will understand why it appears only on certain nights and why it chooses its visitors. But be careful. Knowledge comes at a cost." Jonah stepped closer to the light. It emanated from a doorway carved into the stone wall of a building that did not appear on any map, one that seemed to shimmer between existence and non-existence. Through the threshold, he glimpsed a vast space, a cathedral of mist and shadow, its walls lined with mirrors reflecting infinite versions of Marrow's end, stretching endlessly into dimensions he could not comprehend. Inside, the whispers became voices, recounting stories of all who had entered the town before him. Some pleaded, some laughed, some screamed silently, trapped eternally in a place between memory and reality. The air vibrated with energy, almost alive, and Jonah felt his mind stretching under its weight. A figure emerged from the center, a tall, luminous presence, faceless, yet somehow observing everything simultaneously. Jonah instinctively knew this was the town's consciousness made manifest, the reason the streets twisted, the fog thickened, and the nights stretched endlessly. "Why?" Jonah whispered. "Why do you exist? Why do you trap people?" The presence responded, not with words, but with visions. Jonah saw the town form across centuries, appearing only when the alignment of time and space allowed it. It absorbed visitors not to harm, but to preserve the memories, emotions, and fears of humanity. The town existed as a sanctuary of existence itself, a living archive growing with each night it appeared. "You are here because curiosity brought you," the presence conveyed directly into his mind. "Those who wander, those who question, their essence strengthens me. But some resist, and resistance sharpens understanding." Jonah felt a surge of clarity. The town was not evil. It was alien, beyond morality, existing to sustain itself by collecting fragments of consciousness. Those who entered and succumbed were preserved within it, living in an endless cycle of reflection, memory, and shadow. The young woman placed her hand on his shoulder. "You understand now, Jonah. The town offers a choice. You may leave, return to your world forever marked by this night, or you may stay, become part of its eternal memory, and see more than anyone else ever could." Jonah hesitated, heart pounding. The pull of the town was immense, promising knowledge and immortality in a form he could not fully grasp. Yet the thought of the world outside, of life as he knew it, tugged at him with equal force. Finally, he stepped backward, toward the doorway leading out. The golden light shimmered, casting long, twisting shadows across the cathedral of mirrors. The town's presence seemed to breathe, watching, aware, yet allowing him the choice he made. As he crossed the threshold, the alley returned to its foggy, twisted form. The golden door dissolved, leaving only the street he had entered from. Behind him, Marrow's end pulsed faintly, waiting for the next night, the next visitor. Jonah exhaled, trembling, aware that he had survived, yet forever changed. The town had shown him its heart, its purpose, and its depth, and he knew that the memory of this night would haunt him forever. The whispers faded, leaving only the soft echo in his mind. Those who see the heart of the town may leave, but they never forget.
Jonah stumbled onto the familiar streets of his world, the fog of Marrow's End replaced by the damp, cold night of his own city. His breath came in shaky bursts, heart still racing from the intensity of the town's final test. The golden light, the mirrors, the whispers, all were gone, yet the memory lingered, embedded deep in his mind. The young woman had vanished as he crossed the threshold. He glanced around, half expecting her or another figure to emerge from the shadows, but the streets were empty. Only the distant hum of his city reminded him that he had returned to reality. Jonah walked slowly, feeling the weight of knowledge pressing on him. He could never forget what he had seen. The town, its consciousness, the echoes of those who had come before him. Each shadow, each whisper, every twisted alleyway was now etched into his memory, permanent and unyielding. Days passed, but the night remained vivid in his mind. He found himself noticing anomalies in his surroundings, reflections in mirrors that seemed to shimmer with scenes of Marrow's End, shadows moving slightly against the laws of physics, whispers barely audible when he was alone. The town had left a mark, a subtle connection between him and its endless night. Jonah realized that Marrow's End was not bound by time or location. It existed in the spaces between reality, emerging only when it chose, yet leaving traces in those who had seen it. Those who survived carried a fragment of it forever, a thread linking them to the town's eternal consciousness. Despite the fear, Jonah felt a strange awe. The town had shown him truths beyond comprehension, a living archive of human experience, memory, and emotion. Its existence was alien, powerful, and eternal, and though he had returned to his world, he understood the fragility of the boundary between his reality and Marrow's End. He knew one day the town might call him again, when the alignment of nights allowed it, when the fog and streets twisted once more, it could appear, and he might be compelled to walk its streets again. And when that night came, Jonah would know the rhythm, the rules, and the cost of curiosity. For now, though, he returned to his life, forever changed, carrying the memory of the town in his mind. The whispers occasionally returned, faint and distant, reminding him, "Those who see the heart of the town may leave, but they never forget." And so Jonah lived on, aware that somewhere, just beyond the veil of night, Marrow's End waited, patient, eternal, and always hungry for those who dared to wander.
Weeks turned into months, yet Jonah's life carried the imprint of Marrow's End. He returned to the routines of his world, work, friends, streets he had known all his life, but nothing felt fully real anymore. The memory of the town lingered at the edge of perception, a constant whisper in his thoughts. Mirrors in his apartment sometimes flickered with glimpses of the impossible streets, shadows that moved independently, figures walking endlessly in loops he could not fully see. At night, the faint hum of the town sometimes echoed in his ears, gentle yet unyielding, reminding him that he had crossed into something far older and stranger than reality itself. He tried to speak of it to anyone, friends, colleagues, but words failed him. How could he explain a town that existed between nights, alive, sentient, consuming memories and shaping reality? The disbelief of others made him realize a truth as chilling as the town itself. Marrow's End could not be shared. Those who saw it alone carried the knowledge, and alone they bore the consequences.
Jonah became more attuned to the world's subtle anomalies, the way shadows sometimes lingered too long, how reflections occasionally betrayed impossible angles, or how a familiar street would briefly twist into something unrecognizable. He knew that the town's influence had left a permanent mark, a thread connecting him to its consciousness. And then came the nights when fog rolled unnaturally, soft golden light glimmered faintly in the distance, and the whispers, barely audible, returned to him. Move, survive, belong. The rhythm of the town still reached him, calling, reminding, testing. Jonah understood finally that Marrow's end was eternal. It would appear on nights it chose, collecting the curious, the bold, and those who dared to astray from the familiar. Those who survived carried its knowledge, but the town always waited for the next opportunity, patient and inexorable. Though he walked among people, Jonah knew he was never truly alone. Somewhere beyond the veil of night, the town persisted, aware of him, waiting for the day it would call him back. And when that night came, he would walk its streets again, older, wiser, and forever changed by the town that only exists on certain nights. In the quiet of his apartment, as the city slept, Jonah whispered to himself, "I have seen its heart, and I will never forget."